today. Tom, Adisti, would you like to briefly introduce yourself and perhaps share a fun fact about you?
Please, ladies first. Please, Adisti, go.
Why is it ladies first? I'm suddenly in the spotlight. So Adisti, I'm Adisti Ikawardani Halawa. You can call me Adisti as short. I'm the localization manager inside Tracker. My fun fact is every morning I walk my cat just like people usually walk their dog. And that's not actually, what is it, what I want, but that's because that's what my cat wants, guys. So I'm ruled by my cat. That's my fun fact.
Nice. Thanks, Adisti, for sharing.
Yeah, my turn. Hey guys, I'm Tom. I'm solutions architect at Localize, and probably my fun fact is that I'm already 25 years in the industry, in the localization industry.
Wow. Yes. A dinosaur in the localization industry. So we look forward to hearing from you, Tom, and the precious insights. Before sharing the agenda, we have also an icebreaker activity for you. Considering that holiday season is around the corner, please share with us what's your tips to survive the holidays with family. If you would like to share, please. Let's see. Take a walk when everyone starts fighting. That's a good one. Making sure there is enough food. Also, very important. Anyone else? Let's see if we have one more tip. Don't burn the turkey. That's true. Thanks, Brit. So thank you again, Tom and Adisi, for sharing your fun facts. To everyone, indeed, Tom is a localization consultant and solution architect at Lokalise. He has a great experience in the localization industry, and Adisti is a localization manager at SiteTracker, one of our customers. Thank you so much, Adisti, for joining us today and co-host this session. So let me actually share with you the agenda for today so we can then kickstart. We will start with a brief introduction to localization, internationalization, and pluralization. And this part will be presented by Tom, of course. Tom will also be sharing some best practices to adopt to make these actions successful on your site. And then we will actually hand over to Adisti for some best practices on style guides and how to create a successful style guide for your product as well. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we will also have some time for Q&A. So now, without any further ado, Tom, please, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Michaela. Hey guys, it's my pleasure to be here and share my knowledge with you. And the reason why I'm here was because we collected quite a bunch of questions from our customers around the localization and internationalization, how to make it better, how to make it more efficient. So I will do my best to share at least some of the best practices today. And because we have just a very little time and we will be barely scratching the surface, there will be a QR code on every of our pages. So if the topic rings your bells and it sparks your interest, then you can scan it by your phone and you will be taken directly to our documentation, our website, where you can learn more details. Just to put the things into the right context, here on this slide, you can see the entire cycle. Like where to start. What is the start? You are starting with your source code. Then there is this internationalization process, which ends up with localizable resources that is then a subject for the processing inside TMS, in our case, Localize. And then again, once it's translated into localized versions of these, then followed up by your build release. So you end up with final product. So this is the whole cycle. And please, Michaela, if you can switch to the next slide. These are highlighted areas we will be talking about today, about the parts of the internationalization, not the entire one at all. There is not enough time for that, but we will be talking about pluralization, key naming convention, placeholders, best practices, tips and tricks, how to import the stuff into Localize, how to deal with the localization processes inside Localize with special focus on the localization management and tasks and translation memory, and then export from Localize. So it gives you a sense what you can do and what you can achieve here. Okay, please, Michaela, next slide. Okay, internationalization. If someone is not familiar with internationalization, definitely please take a look. In general, this is, in short, a separation of your code from the localizable content. You can imagine this separation, and when you treat English as another locale, that you separate your code from anything that is locale specific. It might be hard-coded text, but not only that, it might be a format of time and date, a format of currency, number representation. So these are all things that should be separated from the development. And developers, they need to know how to deal with those. As an outcome of internationalization, you should end up with something that basically lives in parallel with the code itself. And the code itself should be locale agnostic. And these resource files are produced by so-called internationalization frameworks. This is definitely not something that developers will do from scratch. It would be super inefficient, but there are INTN frameworks that will help them to do the job, to basically help them to, down the road, merge their code with the translated localization resource files in order to produce the final translated and fully localized product. So take a look at this QR code. You will find there a list of available INTN frameworks. It's huge, basically. And depending on the framework you use for your development, then you can find the details how to make it work in, because this is obviously not the place where I can familiarize you with all the aspects of every framework. So please, Michaela, next slide. I would like to point out, however, two quite common, not two, three actually, common pitfalls that are related to INT9. And first of these is key naming. Key naming basically means that this is a sort of variable name that connects the place in your code with the entry in your resource file. It's not the actual text, it just connects these two things. So then you can take whatever the translation is and put it in your code during the building phase. And just to this, you might say, okay, this is a variable name. So what's the deal here? It's pretty straightforward. Yes and no, because you should ensure in your process that two developers independently basically for them it should be impossible to come up with the same key name, so avoid any duplicates. That's one thing. So the process should be structured in a way that it's impossible. At the same time, you might say, okay, why it's not just a random string? It might be a set of characters and numbers, and it will do the job. Okay, it's important if you show this key to someone else in the team, then just based on this, it will be clear where it belongs. Take it as another source of metadata, extra information, context information of what the string is or where it appears. So if you talk to your UX designers, if you talk to your managers, if you need to discuss something, you need to mention something, just the key name itself should give you enough context of what it is, where it appears. What is the feature? What is the module? What is the screen? What is the UI element? All these things can be encoded in this. So don't take it as something that is random. It can be whatever, technically, yes, but it might be very useful if you stick to something like that. And of course, for translators, it's super important part of their job because they can guess of where it appears and how it should be translated. So that's why the key naming is quite important. And if you can stick to that, and you can elaborate a strategy, you can figure it out, share it, and stick to that strategy. This is the best thing you can do. And as I've seen, producing some frameworks were producing the key names actually was the source text, like duplicate of the source text. This is something that technically works, but it's best to avoid it as much as possible. Please, Michaela, next slide. Another challenge is, don't know whether you've seen this so far or not. Again, you can scan the QR code and learn more about it, is how to deal with plurals, pluralization. Like if you have any countable objects in your code, then it's super inefficient to do it using if, then, else, like multiple instances of your string depending on the countable objects. There is this whole specification introduced by Unicode that can help you, and based on that there are libraries that can help you to streamline this. So if you just put together these JSON-like structures, it will work properly and your code will handle it properly. And depending on the actual value in that countable variable, in this case it says quantity, depending on the actual value, the right text will be applied. What is bad about it, because okay, on the good side, it simplifies developers' lives a lot. On the other side, it basically makes trouble to translators, and not many TMSs on the market can handle it properly. So whereas in the TMS where this is not supported, translators, they need to be aware of this syntax and they need to be able to come up with proper syntax. And the devil is hidden in the detail. It's not like replicating just the source syntax in the target. Translator needs to be aware of grammar categories because it might differ. It might differ, for example, from standard English to Slavic languages. There are different grammar categories depending on countable objects. And translator they need to be aware of that. Localize has a partial support for these plurals. So when you add a new language, new target language, then the same, the applicable set of grammar rules is applied, and translator can see, hey, there are different categories, so they can focus on the translation only. Next slide, please. Another challenge in the localization, internationalization are these placeholders. Placeholders basically make your text dynamic. For example, hello, dear user, and user should be replaced by the actual name. Again, the problem is that for various platforms, there are various versions of these placeholders. And if you want to, for example, cover iOS and Android, and you want to work with only one source code or code repository, then you need to make it somehow universal. And this is concept that Lokalise introduced to cover specifically this area. Instead of working with two independent platforms and translating twice, you can merge it together, and these placeholders will actually be replaced with these, what we call universal placeholders. So you can have only one set of strings to be translated, including these universal placeholders, and depending on the export from Lokalise, it will get transformed into the correct format depending on the target platform. Michaela, please, next slide. Now we have finished the internationalization. Now we are about the import into Lokalise project. What means you can use for that? We are talking mainly about software localization today. So you can stick to our integration apps, which basically means that you can connect Lokalise project with almost any software repository out there. You can use for that API or command line interface, and this is very useful in case that your repository is behind the firewall. So integration apps are not of any use, and you can write your own CLI commands, or alternatively, you can stick to GitHub Actions that can help you with that and can streamline and automate integration with Lokalise, even with your repository behind the firewall. And of course, if everything else fails, there is always this manual upload. Michaela, please, next slide. Now, we have internationalized files. We have imported them into Lokalise. And now, what is this about, really? A key purpose of any TMS basically boils down into one very specific feature, and this is to keep a sync between source and target. If you imagine yourself translating anything in the spreadsheet, or if you have done something in the past, something like that, you soon realize that with the scale, it becomes unmanageable, because for one quite simple reason, you are not able to track changes in the source and make sure that these are properly reflected in the target languages. That's why TMS, that's why, of course, in our case, Lokalise. So this is the core idea behind that you don't need to keep track of these changes yourself. TMS will do it for you. So if there's any change to the source, you will get immediately notified in the visual form or in Slack, email, webhook notification for automation purposes that there is a change in the source, and this needs to be replicated and reflected in the target languages. and what is the progress you have these statuses for that. Now, the translation process from now on, it can be really as easy as instructing AI or a machine translation engine. Hey, give me my translations, and that's it. You don't need to care much about it. So it might be as simple as this. You can just take those translations and use it. These days, it's fine-tuned to the point where it's really usable even in this very simple localization process. But if we start talking about more complex workflows, what distinguishes these complex workflows from the simple ones is basically the degree of the quality you expect to have from these basically translation sources like your linguist or AI. So this is mostly about introducing extra steps in the workflow that will ensure that you get the best possible quality out of your process. So you can introduce extra workflow steps in terms of, for example, post-editing the machine translations. You might introduce your marketing approval, legal approval, in-country review, and these things. You can run even AI-driven LQA, which stands for linguistic quality assurance or assessment. You can invite even external people using review centers, so they don't need to have any license for that. They can just come and comment on that. So you can sort of crowdsource these quality checks, so they can share their opinion on the translations, and then your linguists can implement it. So these are basically the means how to improve the quality. And for that, especially for these steps, the context is crucial, not only for humans, it's also for AI. And there belongs the key names, what we discussed, screenshots, key descriptions, instructions, glossaries, style guides, and this will be covered by Adisti later on today. Please, Michaela, next slide.
Yeah, before moving on, actually, we have a poll. So we would like to ask everybody if you are currently using AI for localization. And if yes, also, it would be great to hear how you're currently using it. Majority is not using it. Let's see now. Yeah. Okay. 46% of the answer are mentioning that yes, they do use AI, while the remaining 54% is not using AI yet. And we can share a bit the details later on. So Tom, please, let's move on with the presentation.
Yeah, I have last 3 slides. On this slide, I want to briefly touch the translation memory. If you don't know what it is about, you can imagine this basically as a cache memory, because if you imagine that you need to produce translation, you need to get translation somewhere. And these are the list of sources where you can get the translation. In case of Localized, it might be through our partners, language solution providers, your linguists, freelancers, machine translation, or AI translation. In any case, you have to pay for that. And if it's once translated, it's better to save it somewhere so you can recycle it in the future. So that's why we have the translation memory, and it serves as a cache to save you basically some cache. And if you wonder what does it mean, the TMX 1.4b, it means this is a standardized import-export file format, XML based, that you can import and export the content from the translation memory. If you need to switch to another tool, if you need to fine-tune your translation memory, this is a format that you can stick to. Next slide, please. Localization management. This is something that is not really necessary if you deal with just a small project, but when you scale up, this is something insanely useful and critical for your mission. You need to make sure that everyone knows exactly what to do, when to deliver that. Imagine you have 20 plus languages, 20 plus projects. This is something that becomes unmanageable quite soon. So specifically for that purpose, Lokalise has built-in tasks. And you can imagine task as an entity to be basically a job to be done, because you can assign a assignee who's supposed to deliver the job by when, and you can define the scope. In localized environment, the project is a list of keys, and it might be difficult to navigate through that. Thanks to very powerful filtering, you can define your own filters based on the statuses, metadata, that you can precisely define, okay, this is only the scope that the given translator or reviewer is supposed to work on. And once the task is created, he will or she will receive notification via email or Slack, and basically you can chain the tasks to create more sophisticated workflows depending on your goals. And yeah, Michaela, the last slide. And once everything is translated, then the final step is to export. For export to repositories, again, you can stick to integration apps that we have in our App Store. We have over-the-air updates for pushing changes directly to mobile platforms. Or if you deal with web applications, you can stick to CI/CD integration and export your content into S3 bucket where it can be utilized by your web app. And of course, you can automate the things via CLI API plus webhooks. And of course, if anything else fails, then you can stick to manual export as a last resort. So that's it from me for today. It was really quick. And now I'm passing my word to Adisti, please.
Thanks, Tom. We also have another poll before handing it over to Adisti. So the question is, what is your biggest concern or issue with style guides? We will be collecting the answers. And in the meantime, I think, Adisti, we can start with the presentation.
Thank you, Michaela. So yeah, today we're going to talk about how to stay sane with style guide, glossary, and context. Or if I can rephrase it, is actually how we in Site Tracker stay sane with style guide, glossary, and context. Why? It is how we in SiteTracker, because everything here is based on our experience, on my experience, and your team situation, your condition might be different, so you might need to tweak here and there. There's that. I just want to floor that disclaimer first. So first, let's talk about localization quality trio. So what is the trio? First, we have the style guide, which is we're using it for the consistency and brand voice. Then we have the glossary and context. Michaela, can we go to the style guide, please? So for the style guide, we use it to define the tone, the formality, the grammar, and other stylistic preferences. It kind of helps us to ensure that the translation reflect the brand's personality and also feel unified throughout all different content that we have. And then for the glossary, we use it for term consistency. So it is actually a list of essential terms, brand-specific languages, and any preferred translation. So it's not only on the term, but it's also about the definition and also the preferred translation. It prevents misinterpretation, it keeps the passaging clear, and help the translator and AI to handle any industry or technical terms. Next one is on context. It helps us with accurate and relevant translation. So it allows the translator or AI, if we use AI, to understand the intended use of the term and how they appear in the interface. Without it, the translation will be at risk of becoming too literal or out of place. Now we're going to deeper into each of the trio. And we will start with...
Before we move on, maybe it would
Yeah.
be great if I just share the results from the survey quickly.
Okay.
I can read them
Yep.
off really quick. We had 18 people respond. And here are the biggest concerns. First, finding time to make one. That's a good point.
That's a good one there.
Yeah. Another one is, how do you even start one in the first place? Another, to make sure that the content is really adequate for a style guide and it's not just a set of obvious grammar rules for that locale. Creating them is the biggest pain point, how to consistently present them to external collaborators, keeping them up to date and consistent across languages. Someone's never used them before. Someone's asking, how specific should I be with my guidelines? How will they be implemented in translations and what to include? They only apply for the master language. Translators don't consider them. Keeping them up to date. Time consuming. Again, when do you find the time with all of your day-to-day work? It seems like that is a problem for everyone. How to translate them to the instructions for the LQA check, maintaining a source of truth that is shareable with people outside of Localize. And we are not very familiar with them yet, but mainly the possibility between is style differences between different countries. And then another person, I just don't know how to use them. So
interesting. Interesting. And let's go to one and one, and then at the end, maybe we can check again on the question if I haven't answered any of them, and then we can loop in back. So let's start with the survival guide for the style guide. So the first one of how to create one. If you want like a detailed of what is style guide and everything, I think Localize have a page on it, and yeah, Michaela or Brittany can share with everybody later. But the first tips is to create a template. You need a template. To start, you need to create a template. The template is the skeleton. It's the foundation. It should be adaptable to all the different languages that you have, and then also the content type. And it should include section on tone, voice, grammar, punctuation, formatting, any preferences, and also example. I also provide my template of how a style guide should be, but that will be at the end. And if we can go through it, if we have time later on. Then the next one is we need to adapt to the theme and type of content, because one size doesn't fit all. This is extremely important for style guide, because your type of theme, whether who's going to create the style guide? Is it going to be AI? Is it going to be the translator from a vendor? Or is it going to be an internal resource from your company that is going to shape the format or the structure of your style guide? And also, who's going to use it? Is it going to be used by an external vendor? Is it going to be used by the internal translator? Or is it going to be used by AI? Because their case is different. So for example, if the style guide is going to be used by internal team, then they will have time to have a look at the detail and everything. If you have a 70-page style guide, that's totally doable. They will have time to read it through. But if it's going to be a vendor, 3 to 5 pages will be the sweet spot there, because you want it to be concise, but it's also going to provide some structure. And if it's going to be AI that's going to use it, then you might need more examples, for example. Next one, we need to involve the stakeholder for review. So you need to reach out and gather the input and encourage any feedback from them. So it really depends on what type of team you are actually currently under. Because, for example, for product development, we rely a lot on the product manager and also the designer to kind of guide us on that. And we also connect to the creative designer, because sometimes they have this vision of how the brand should look like, how it needs to be toned, and things like that. So you need to gather that and then keep it in mind that the style guide is not going to be just static document. It's going to evolve as your brand evolves. So it's a living thing. Then the last one, make it accessible, because it is only effective if the people that's going to use it have access to it. So put it in a shared space. It can be a TMS, it can, for example, like Localized, or it can be in a Coda place, or Teams, any place that you can share it with, or Google Doc. And then raise awareness, because you can put it somewhere, but if people don't really know where they are, they won't be able to check it. So that's really important, that they know where to look for it, I mean. And let's go to glossary now. And this is the survival kit for glossary. This is how we create ours. The first one is to mine the terms itself. So gather the terms from the design, documentation, walkthrough session, or common industry phases, and then work with the stakeholder to ensure that there's no terms that got missed. It's really, really important that we align with the stakeholder, because sometimes, for example, in a product development, usually the product manager and also the designer, they will have a vision of how the product is going to be, and they will know what kind of terminology that needs to be used. So obviously, we can come up with a list and say, hey, we read the guidance and everything. This is from our standpoint, this is the term that's probably need to be in the glossary. Do you have any input? And things like that. Then let's go to the next one, get the correct description and also context. Because once again, if it's a product, for example, like a software, usually there's some people that actually have a vision of how things should be described and things like that. So you need to collaborate with the stakeholder. For example, for us, we work together with the product manager and also the designer. They are the one who actually come up with the description for each of the term, and then we tone it down, because sometimes they will come up with a description that's really, really jargon heavy. Then we need to make it more, easily to be digested by the translator. And next one, we need to involve the internal natives and have them reviewed, because sometimes they have a better view of how a term used in real life. One of the examples that I have is we translate a deck for the customer success manager, and they're supposed to present that in front of their customer. And they actually have a request, and that request is to not translate the word customer success manager. Obviously, in the language that we translate into, we are actually supposed to translate it, and there's a perfectly correct translation for them. But because the goal is for them to be able to present in front of the customer in confidence, and they need to be comfortable with the context, we want to honor that request. And things like that. There will be stuff that kind of, we need to adapt based on the situation. And the next one, and create a process for update and review. So we need to create a process to update the glossary, to mine the term, to have the description, to have it translated, to have it reviewed, and store it where people who's going to use it to be able to have access to it. And it needs to be a part of the product workflow. So for example, for us, we actually do mine the term really early on. We started during the product ideation. So we start with when the product design and also product documentation is shared for the first time, we start mining. And then we go toward the translation, the review, and the finalization. So the idea is we want the term to be translated even before the translation happened. Sometimes it happened, but sometimes we have to do it at the same time as the translation. But the idea is the description should already be visible and usable for the translator by the time the translation happened. And let's go to next one. So context, the last of the trio is context. And context is everybody's business. So this is not a case where you tell people, no, this is not your business, because this one, context, is everybody's business. So the first one is we need to use all possible ways. There's lots of ways to provide context. For example, you can use key name. We can also use a string short description because, for example, like in our case, we can't really use key names because it's actually because our platform is Salesforce, and they already have a certain name of naming their key, so we can't really use that. So we need to use the string short description. And the goal for all of our label, we usually have these three: when, where, and placeholder. So when the label is going to come up, where it's going to come up, and if there is a placeholder, what will the placeholder going to be replaced with? Then we also can use Figma screenshot from the designer. You can use that as a context. And then the last one is obviously any product walkthrough video. And we need to include context as a part of the content development. So each role in the content development need to be aware of their part in providing context. So for example, if the product is a software, then you have the product manager, you have the designer, you have the engineer, and you have the QA. All of them need to understand that they need to provide you with context. So for example, for the product manager, they can give you with the product documentation, and then the designer can give us with the Figma, and then the developer can help us with key naming and also the screenshot description, and QA usually can provide us with the screenshot too. Collaborate with them to make it a standard in the product development and then make it mandatory. So it is kind of cemented in the workflow itself. And then last one for context is to make sure it is effective. We need to think about who is going to use the context. Is this content going to be translated by human, or is it going to be translated by AI? Because, for example, human, they can use all type of context. I mean, if they use the key name, they also can take into account the key short description, Figma screenshot, walkthrough video. They can take that into reference. But if it's going to be AI, then your main point will be the short description. That's where you want it to be really clear. And obviously, once you provide the context, do they know how to access them? Provide a guidance to the translator where you will put the Figma screenshot. Is it going to be in the label itself? Like in Localized, you can actually, attach the screenshot into each of the label. And then if it's going to be a walkthrough video, where are you going to store them? And yeah, measure the engagement. Are they actually checking them? Do they raise question about that? And then yeah, check the quality of the translation itself. And once again, we've gone through all the localization quality trio. We've gone through style guide, glossary, and context. And then probably you will start to think, oh my God, this is actually a lot. It's lots of work. And then the question is, why do we actually want to do this? It looks like a hard work. Can we go to the next slide? So yeah, why do we need the trio? What is the motivation to do this? The first one is because we do care about quality. And if the question is, how do you make time, is because we need to prioritize it. Because if we want to talk about quality, without these three, it's really impossible to make a quality translation, because it enables the translator to provide with accurate and high quality translation. And it's the same with AI. If you don't have the style guide, you don't have the context and also the glossary, it will be hard for the AI to actually provide quality translation. So you need to prioritize. That's the key. And then Why do we need it again? It's because it drives involvement and trust with the stakeholder during the process. So take it as to leverage to kind of bring in your stakeholder into your system so you can also get involved into their system. So during the process of building this glossary, the style guide and context, we collaborate with them closely. And then it kind of demonstrates that we care about quality. We actually take measure to make sure that we have the highest quality. So they can start to trust our process, our way of thinking, and then they have the opportunity to contribute. It's like we're exposing our system to them. They can start to, to collaborate, and yeah, we can gain their trust. So they will be willing to care more about localization. And the next one, so this is the style guide template. Once again, this is actually created based on site tracker situation. So I'm going to explain. So our translator is the one that actually translator, which is a vendor, is the one that is actually creating the style guide for us, and they are actually the one who's using them. So, but the style guide itself is created by me. So the template that we use have an opening that kind of lay out the purpose of explain what is a style guide and how to use it effectively. And then there is a company overview. So for example, for us, it's like there's an intro to the company, what is Site Tracker product, and what industry we are fall into, and then any special condition. For example, for Site Tracker, we are actually living inside Salesforce. So that means that our glossary and also our style guide need to align together with Salesforce too. So that kind of special condition, it will depend on your company situation. And then we need to also explain about the scope of the translation. So what is going to be kept as in English? What is in scope for translation? Then we also give them the local specific guidance, the voice and tones, any approach on gender, any terminology and glossary, where to find them, and then any acronym. Do we keep it in English? Do we want to translate? And then any feature naming. So if there is a feature name, do we keep it in English? Do we translate? What is the rules? And then any geopolitical concern. For example, do we translate country as country, or is it country or / region, and things like that? And then punctuation and capitalization. Character limit for us is really important because our character limit is a hard limit. So you can't really play around with it. It's a hard limit. So they need to know if it's not going to fit, what should they do, and things like that. Then any additional notes from the translator. And the last one is reference. So because in our case, we want it to be concise and short and sweet, right? So if there is anything that doesn't fit into 3 or 5 pages, they can put it in the reference. And yeah, that is all, everybody. Thank you. And
Thanks a lot, Adisti, and thanks a lot, Tom. Super useful presentation, amazing tips. Thank you so much for sharing. It's time for Q&A. Let's see what we have. I also shared a question, but let's start, of course, with the first one. How can you create a style guide when you have different use of the same language and different clients?
different use of the same.
So how can you create a style guide when you have different use of the same language and different clients?
So is this going to be for, I suppose this is for an agency, isn't it? Or because for in our case, for example, marketing usually have different style guide than the product UI, and their style, their tone, and everything might be different. Or for example, the content in knowledge management. If we translate that, that's going to be a little bit different from the marketing team style guide. So we are supposed to have different use for Spanish through different countries. So ideally, if it's a different language, for example, like Spanish for Mexico and Spanish for Spain, we have 2 different style guide. And each of the translator for those variation will create them separately.
If I may step in, it's a good idea to even store it as a separate language locale in the translation memory, not to mix it together.
Yes, we separate them. We have different, what is it? So Spanish for Spain and also Spanish for Mexico.
Yeah,
And then we have different translation memory, we have different glossary, and we have different style guide for each of them.
Pilar, does it answer your question? In case, just share more in the chat. The next question, regarding the glossary, we found that automations we have running don't take into account the words in the glossary. Is there a way to fix this?
I will partially answer it, but I will answer with another question, because I'm curious what the automations are based on. Is it just a machine translation or AI? In case of machine translation, there is nothing we can do about it. It's simply fully disconnected, independent. In case of AI, then it would be good to talk to our product team to review AI prompts, whether this is something that is fully covered there. If yes, then still it might be occasional, because AI is not guaranteed to stick to terminology like in 100% cases. There still might be some omissions, there might be, but it should be rather rare. So if it's a common problem and you use AI, please let us know. Probably the best way would be to get in touch with our support team through intercom icon on every of our pages. And we will definitely be open to discuss this with you in detail and circle it back to our product team if it turns out to be a real problem. Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. Aditi, would you like to add anything on top of that?
I think my take will be the same, because normally the neural machine translation, we use automation too, so that one is not going to take into account our glossary at all, because yeah, it's a neural one. But the AI is supposed to take into account the glossary. We did a bit of a trial, and yeah, it does take into account our glossary.
Yeah, and actually specify that it is set up in different orders: first translation memory, after the machine translation, and after AI. So I think that machine translation will be the issue here then.
Most likely.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I see also a couple of questions in the chat. Is it possible to have keys automatically replace layer name in Figma?
This question is probably to me. We have this automatic translation, key name patterns that should work, but the thing is that it can work with only a limited amount of metadata, out of which the key name can be constructed. It takes into consideration the screen name, group name, element name, and that's it. You basically need to figure out how to structure your design in order to automate the stuff, which is sometimes doable, but in case of more complex and sophisticated designs, it's really not possible. So, and it's quite common pain, this one. There is one, let's say, half workaround that you name your text layer directly with the key name that you want to end up with in Localized. And this saves you this tedious work for replacing the auto-proposed key names during the export. But still, it's not the best one, but probably better than nothing.
Yeah, and Carolina, eventually feel free to connect with us offline so we can follow up, and eventually we can loop your CSM in as well. I have a question, but I'll mention it for the last. Aditi, do you create specific style guides and glossaries for UX, UI copy versus marketing copy? We find it tough to clearly tell linguistics how much freedom they have when localizing. For example, UI, UX might be more one-to-one translation, whereas marketing have more space to use different terms, etc. However, sometimes for marketing copying, linguistics sticks too closely to the glossary, and the copy sometimes sounds robotic.
So I'm going to answer the first one first. So
Mhm.
whether I create a separate style guide for marketing and also UX, UI. So the answer is no, but we have a separate section. So for example, for the UX UI, the tone and style is going to be like this. And then for marketing, it's going to be like this, but it's still in the same document. So it's still the same, style guide, but we have section on how to on what style we want for the UX UI, what style we want for the marketing, and what style we want, for example, for the knowledge management and things like that. But it's still the same copy. And as for the glossary, it's also the same. So the reason why we want to use the same glossary is because we are actually kind of working for the same product. A part of it is the product development, and another part is the marketing of the same product. So the term should be the same. How we call, for example, in our case, how we call job in the UX UI should be the same on how we call job in the marketing, because otherwise it's going to be really confusing. So, and related to that, on the copy that sometimes sounds robotic, my suggestion will be maybe you need to, to kind of see what kind of term that needs to be added as the glossary. It needs to be something that is not going to be dynamic. For example, it can be a feature name, or for example, for us, it will be like something like feature name or a kind of function that happen in the product itself that might also happen to pop up in the marketing, but it should always be named the same, because we need that correlation, because how something is called in the product and the marketing needs to align.
Thanks.
That will be my take on that.
Perfect. We are already at time. Perhaps one quick question. Some managers prefer to use source English text as a key name. Their argument is if something goes wrong with keys or app or localize, etc., a user will see at least the English text. Do you have any advice on how to persuade them that key name equal English text is a bad idea?
Okay, I'll try my best to be quick with the answer. The short answer is it might go terribly wrong from the functional perspective, because not every TMS is as robust as Localized, and you can simply be facing issues when importing such poorly named keys into the TMS. Imagine there might be placeholders, there might be plurals, there might be special Unicode characters that cannot be handled properly. So this might be source of problem. In any case, you are basically replicating the information. You are creating a redundant information in the key name, which is useless. Try to think about it. The key name is a precious thing for where you can store extra metadata that helps along the way. This was not mentioned by only me, it was mentioned by Adisti as a super important part of the overall context. So if you stick to English, you are basically getting rid of this extra precious context. So in short, these are two major reasons for that.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom. And if it's okay for everyone, I'm taking one last question that we got in the chat. When I work with a style guide for the first time, I read it and highlight the things that look like I might do them wrong. I also extract some items from the semi-automatic QA with the Xbench QA tool, but these cannot cannot be done for the whole guide. Can you recommend any best practice for tool-based semi-automatic verification of style guide compliance? Loading the guide in AI might be a possibility, but I have not tried yet. Adisti, perhaps, would you like to take it?
Oh, really sorry. Can you repeat that again? I kind of lost with the
Of
question.
course, it's
Mhm.
in the chat as well.
Oh,
So
okay, let me.
I can
Actually,
quickly just
Can I
drop
suggest that we actually follow up with this one via email because I
Ah.
hate, and we have another webinar that's supposed to start 4 minutes ago and they're having to wait for us to end this webinar in order to start the next one.
okay,
So
we will take it
need to stop.
offline. Yes,
Mhm.
thanks,
just
Brit.
my 2 cents. You can try our AI LQA that takes your style guides into account. So that's basically one way of doing that.
Perfect. Thanks to our fantastic speakers. Thank you to you all for joining us today. Thank you so much. Please enjoy the holidays and we will get in touch soon. Thank you so much again and have a good one. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you.